It's going back to the mid-1970s, I believe, because he was killed in 77, I believe.
Martin Sheen, born as Ramon Antonio Gerardo Estevez on August 3, 1940, in Dayton, Ohio, grew up in a large immigrant family that faced constant hardship. His father, Francisco, was from Spain, while his mother, Marianne, had come from Ireland. Money was always short, and with 10 children in a small house, life was difficult. At just 10 years old, Martin lost his mother, which left the family in crisis. The church stepped in to keep them together when there was talk of sending the children to orphanages. On top of that, Martin suffered from health issues, including polio and a birth injury to his arm, leaving it shorter and weaker. Despite all these challenges, he showed early signs of leadership. As a young boy, he even led a strike among golf caddies when he saw unfair treatment. This combination of hardship and courage shaped the man he would later become. But while his childhood built resilience, it also planted seeds of rebellion, risk-taking, and restlessness that would affect his adult life and his marriage in ways no one could have predicted. From a young age, Sheen knew he wanted to be an actor. His father hoped he would attend college, but Martin had other plans. He deliberately failed the entrance exam for the University of Dayton to pursue his dream. With little money, he worked odd jobs, saved what he could, and finally made his way to New York in the late 1950s. There, he joined theater groups and began to get small roles. His big break came in 1964 with the Broadway play The Subject Was Roses, which earned him critical acclaim and a Tony nomination. Soon after, he started appearing in films and television, slowly building a reputation as a serious actor. Yet, behind the growing fame, Martin was already forming patterns of obsession and recklessness. He worked long hours, drank heavily, and often lived on the edge. His ambition was clear, but so was the toll it began to take on his health and relationships. Acting was his passion, but it was also the first sign of how his personal life would often take second place to his career. By the 1970s, Martin Sheen's career had taken off. His chilling role in Badlands made him a household name, and, soon after, he was cast in Francis Ford Coppola's legendary film, Apocalypse Now. The production became one of the most troubled shoots in Hollywood history, and Sheen found himself pushed to the edge. The stress, combined with heavy drinking, led to a massive heart attack at just 36 years old. He nearly died, and doctors gave him a 50% chance of survival. Even during this terrifying period, Martin kept pushing forward with his work. He often used alcohol to cope with pressure, lying to his wife Janet about where he was and what he was doing. She stayed home, raising their 4 children, working jobs, and even paying the bills when his money ran out. Martin's image in public was of a brilliant, dedicated actor, but in private, he was spiraling out of control. These years built the foundation for the crisis that nearly destroyed his marriage. Janet Templeton, whom Martin had married in 1961, became the quiet force that held the family together. While Martin was away on sets, drinking, or disappearing, Janet kept their home and children safe. There were times when the family was nearly broke, and it was Janet who saved their house from being lost. She worked tirelessly, sometimes taking on multiple jobs, while also being both mother and father to their children when Martin was absent. But she wasn't just strong in practical matters, she was also brutally honest. Martin has often said that Janet was the scariest person he ever met, not because she was harsh, but because she never lied. She confronted him when his drinking and dishonesty threatened to destroy everything. More than once, she nearly walked away from the marriage, but somehow, she stayed. Her loyalty, honesty, and persistence became the anchor that eventually pulled Martin back from the brink. Without her, his career, health, and even his life might have collapsed entirely. The late 1970s and early 1980s marked the lowest point for Martin Sheen. His drinking grew worse, and his lies to Janet multiplied. He would tell her he was one place, but in reality, he was out drinking or caught in the chaos of Hollywood. The financial strain deepened, and at one point, they were close to losing everything. Even when Martin began acting in powerful roles, that reflected real-life struggles, such as playing an alcoholic father in Shattered Spirits. The work triggered his own addictions and nearly destroyed him. On top of that, his activism while Noblefen led to arrests and time away from home. Janet had to bail him out of jail, sometimes in the middle of family celebrations. For 20 years, Martin admits, he was a dishonest husband and unreliable father. These years tested their marriage like nothing else. It seemed as though everything, his health, finances, career, and family, was collapsing at once, and the marriage might not survive. In 1981, a trip to India marked a turning point in Martin Sheen's life. While in Kolkata, he saw poverty and starvation that shook him deeply. For the first time, he fully realized how destructive his choices had been, not only for himself, but for his family. When he returned to the United States, he walked into a church, confessed his struggles, and sought forgiveness. This experience reawakened his faith and became the foundation for his recovery. By 1987, Martin finally got sober, and this time, it lasted. He stayed sober for more than 40 years, rebuilding both his personal and professional life. Janet's patience and loyalty were central to this change. She had endured 2 decades of lies, heartbreak, and disappointment, but her presence gave Martin the second chance he needed. Slowly, he became the father and husband he had failed to be before. The family began to heal, and his career took on new meaning as he balanced acting with activism and faith. In later years, Martin Sheen admitted publicly that he regretted many of his past choices. He wished he had been more honest with Janet, more present for his children, and more courageous about keeping his real name instead of adopting Sheen. Still, he found ways to make peace with his past. His film The Way, directed by his son Emilio, became not just a story of healing and forgiveness, but also a real-life chance for father and son to reconnect. He became a voice for social justice, even getting arrested many times for protesting. But now, these choices reflected his true values rather than reckless rebellion. In interviews, Martin openly credited Janet with saving his life and marriage. Without her, he admitted, he would not have survived. Even at 84, he continued to speak boldly about his beliefs, supporting causes like same-sex marriage and human dignity, proving that growth and change can happen at any stage of life. Martin Sheen's story is not just about fame, movies, or politics. It is about survival, redemption, and love. His career brought him recognition, but his personal battles nearly cost him everything. For 2 decades, his drinking, dishonesty, and recklessness almost destroyed his marriage and family. Yet through it all, Janet Templeton stood firm. She raised their children, saved their home, and confronted Martin with the truth even when he didn't want to hear it. Her strength gave him the chance to change, and ultimately, he did. More than 60 years after they first married Applet, Martin and Janet remained together, proof that love can survive even the darkest storms. Their story is a reminder that no matter how broken a person may become, with honesty, faith, and the right support, it is possible to heal. For Martin Sheen, the man the world saw as a star was nearly undone by his own flaws. But in the end, it was his wife's courage that saved not only their marriage, but his very life. While Martin Sheen battled his addictions and career pressures, his children quietly carried the burden of living with a father who was both inspiring and deeply flawed. Emilio Estevez, his oldest son, often became the stabilizing force at home. When Martin was away, he later admitted that as a boy, he felt the need to act as the man of the house, helping his mother keep things steady during Martin's drinking binges and absences. Charlie Sheen, who would later become a famous actor in his own right, grew up watching his father's struggles and eventually repeated many of the same mistakes with addiction, reckless living, and broken relationships. This generational cycle of pain showed how deep Martin's choices cut into the lives of his children. Janet did everything she could to shield them, but no child escapes such challenges untouched. Over time, though, the family began to find ways to transform their pain into creativity. Emilio wrote and directed films that often carried themes of family, forgiveness, and faith. Charlie's career exploded in television, even as his personal life mirrored his father's darkest years. Ramon and Renee, the other two children, also pursued careers in the arts. Each of them, in their own way, reflected the complex mixture of talent, struggle, and resilience that defined their father. Martin himself would later admit that the hardest part of his past was not his health scares or financial struggles, but knowing the damage his actions caused his children during their most formative years. Another part of Martin Sheen's life that shaped his marriage and family was his commitment to activism. From the 1960s onward, he became one of Hollywood's most outspoken actors, marching for civil rights, protesting wars, and standing up for social justice causes. He was arrested more than 60 times for acts of civil disobedience, including protests at nuclear weapons facilities and demonstrations against U.S. foreign policy. While many admired his courage, these actions also added strain to his marriage. Janet often had to deal with the consequences, whether it was bailing him out of jail, handling media attention, or explaining to their children why their father was missing on holidays because he was protesting somewhere. Martin once joked that his wife had been a single parent many times while he pursued his causes. Yet, as much as these choices brought disruption, they also revealed his heart. His activism was born from his Catholic faith, which emphasized protecting the poor, the oppressed, and the vulnerable. Still, the cost at home was undeniable. Janet supported his values, but often reminded him that his first duty was to his family. Balancing the public fight for justice with private responsibility was one of Martin's greatest challenges. Over time, though, his activism also became part of his healing, helping him shift from selfish behavior toward a life dedicated to others. One of Martin Sheen's lifelong regrets was changing his name. Born Ramon Antonio Gerardo Esteves, he chose Martin Sheen early in his career because casting directors refused to hire him under his real name. While it gave him access to roles and opportunities, it also created a split identity he wrestled with for decades. In interviews, Martin admitted that he often felt he had betrayed himself by denying his heritage. He tried to make peace with the choice by encouraging his children to keep their real names if they wished. Emilio Estevez, for example, refused to adopt Sheen and worked hard to succeed under his true name, even if it meant losing roles. Charlie, however, embraced the stage name and became one of the most recognized Sheens in Hollywood. This struggle with identity added another layer of complexity to Martin's marriage and family life. Janet knew the pain it caused him, and she often reminded him that the name didn't change the person inside. Over time, Martin reconciled with his decision, but he never stopped urging young actors to stay true to their real names if possible. His struggle with identity showed that even success can come at the cost of authenticity, and it became one more lesson he wished he had learned earlier in life. Faith was not always central in Martin Sheen's life, but when he hit rock bottom, it became his lifeline. Raised Catholic, he drifted away from religion during his early career, choosing instead the thrill of fame and the escape of alcohol. But after his near-fatal heart attack and his trip to India, faith returned with new power. He began attending church regularly, seeking confession, and relying on prayer during moments of weakness. Janet, who had always been spiritually grounded, encouraged this transformation but never forced it. Martin once said that she lived the truth while he was still searching for it. His activism also flowed directly from his faith, as he drew inspiration from leaders like Dorothy Day and Oscar Romero. In fact, he often said that playing President Josiah Bartlet in The West Wing allowed him to bring his faith and values into the role, shaping a character who was both powerful and compassionate. Faith not only saved his marriage, but also gave him purpose beyond acting. It became the compass that helped him rebuild trust with Janet and his children, proving that redemption was possible even after years of failure. Although Martin Sheen's story often takes center stage, the truth is that Janet Templeton is the unsung hero of their marriage. She was the one who paid the bills when the house was at risk